Hello everyone, welcome to Gora Studies. In this video, I am going to talk about singleton design pattern. I will mostly cover the theory of the singleton design pattern in this video. In my last video, I already talked about what is design pattern, advantages of design patterns, and type of design patterns. Now coming to the singleton design pattern. What is that? So the definition is saying that singleton pattern is a creational design pattern that guarantees a class has only one instance and provides a global point of access to it. Okay, so what does it mean? It means the singleton class must ensure that only single instance should be created and that single instance can be used by all other classes. Okay, now coming to this diagram so that you can understand properly. So I have three classes, class A, class B, and class C. So all three classes are accessing this class D. So when class A is accessing class D, then object 1 is created. When class B is accessing class D, then object 2 is created. When class C is accessing class D, then object 3 is created. But really we need three different objects here because the class is the same, so that if we can create a single instance and if all the class can access that single instance, then also we can achieve our requirement, right? We can fulfill our requirement. So suppose when class A is accessing class D, that time that object 1 is created, and that object 1 will be accessed by class B and class C also. Okay, then we don't require this object 2 and object 3. Got my point? So when we have only one object of a class, we have only one object of a class, and that object, okay, that object is accessed by all other classes in your application, then we can say, okay, that class is a singleton class, okay, having only one instance or object throughout our application. Okay, right? So if we have only one object, okay, of this class D, okay, and all these three classes, class A, class B, and class 3, class C will access this object 1, then we can say, okay, this class D is a singleton class, right? Now you understood? Okay. So now the question is that if we have a class, the normal class, so how we will make that class as a singleton class? Okay. So for that we have to follow some steps. First one, we have to define a static member or static variable. That variable will hold the instance of the singleton class. Okay. So the next one, we need to make the constructor as private. Okay. So if you make the constructor of class D as private, then you know that constructor should not be accessible, okay, outside this class. So class A, class B, and class C cannot access the constructor of the class D. And you know, to create an object or instantiate a class, we need to call the constructor. So if the constructor is private, then no one can access from outside this class. So class A, class B, class C will not be able to create an object of that class D. So in that case, we are not getting any object. But our requirement is not that. Our requirement is that we should have only one object. So we should create at only one object here. Okay. So now how we will create that? How we will do that? If the constructor is private, then we are not getting any object, not a single object. But we need a object. We need to create a single object. So for that, the next step, what we need to do, we need to specify a static factory method, and that method should be a public method. So inside this class D, if we specify a public factory method, and from that public factory method, if you call the you know the private constructor, that is possible. So as you know, the public, this factory method is a public method, so that that factory method is accessible from class A, class B, and class C. So when class A will call the public factory method, then from that public factory method, okay, the private constructor will be you know invoked, and one object of this class will be created, and that factory method will return return an object of class D. Okay, got my point how it is happening here? Okay, so in my next video I will you know do some hands-on on this. I'll show that how it is happening there, then you can understand properly. Okay, so these are three steps we need to follow to make a class as a singleton class. Okay, that you need to remember. First one, we need to specify a static member that holds the instance of that class. Then we need to make the constructor as private. We have to specify a factory method. That method should be public, and from that method we need to call the private constructor of that class. Okay, so these 3 points are very important. So just you need to remember all these 3 points. Okay. Okay, now there are several ways to implement the singleton pattern. So here you can see here the methods are lazy initialization, thread safe singleton, double check locking, eager initialization, enum singleton, and static block initialization. So in my next videos I will do the coding for all types of methods I mentioned here. Okay, so one by one I will cover the hands-on for all these methods. Okay, now coming to the advantage of singleton design pattern. So from this diagram, what you can understand here, you can see if class D is a not singleton class, then every class will create object. Okay, class A, class B, class C. So object 1, object 2, object 3. And when the object is created, then it will take some memory in the heap. Okay, so we need to allocate allocate memory for these 3 objects. But if the class is a singleton class, then only one object is sufficient in our application. We don't need to create object 2 and object 3. So we can save memory for object 2 and object 3. Okay, so first one is the memory save. Okay, we can save the memory. Second thing is that if you know if you create only one object and that object is accessible throughout your application, all other class can access that object. Okay, then you don't need to create multiple objects. So in that case, if we are not creating multiple objects for a single class, it will increase the performance of your application. Okay, so now the third one is the thread safety. So what is that? So properly implementation of singleton pattern, okay, will provide the thread safety. So this point you can understand properly when I will show you the hands-on and explain there then this one, the thread shape singleton pattern, when I will explain that, okay, and show you the hands-on, then you can understand, okay, how it is providing the thread safety. Okay, now coming to the usage of singleton. So singleton means, already explained, the single object. So when you need a single object throughout your application, then you need to use the singleton design pattern. So what all scenarios you need only a single object? Suppose you are making a database connection in your application. So first time you just make the connection object or connection pool and use that connection object throughout your application. Whenever you require, you just use that object and get the data, update data, okay, or insert data into your database. Okay, and logger, logging is a very important part of any development, because that will help to debug our code. Okay, so in that case, for logger class also, we can create a singleton object of that logger class, and in every class we can use that object. Okay, so to implement a logger classes also, we can use the singleton pattern. The third one is cache object. So for in-memory cache also we can use the singleton pattern. So that same object will be used throughout the application. Okay, so these three advantages, these three usage, okay, are the most important usage. Always we are using the database connection, the logger classes, and the cache objects. So yeah, that's it in this video, and in my next video I will do some hands-on on this singleton design pattern, like the lazy initialization, thread singleton, double check blocking, eager initialization, enum singleton, and static block initialization. Okay, so thank you for watching. See you in the next video.